This here.
Hello, thank you. It's good to be here again.
Again, absolutely that word. Yes, it's great to have you back. One of our regular visitors, and well, not a visitor, a friend and part of the family now, Claire. Absolutely. Part of our bubble. There we go. Part of our Lunch and Learn bubble. But it's great to have you with us. And I know that it's quite poignant to have you on today as we are hearing the announcements going on just at the very moment we started this Lunch and Learn. We've got Mr. Hancock there talking about the various tiers and how that will impact businesses and all of us over the next few weeks. So I'm sure we'll be covering that this Lunch and Learn, or answering as much as we know. I think it's fair to say, Claire, isn't it? The information is still becoming being put in the public domain at the moment.
Yes, that's right. We'll do as much as we can.
Absolutely. Just before we get stuck into the topic itself, though, if this is your first time with us, we're broadcasting on 3 platforms this lunchtime. We are on Zoom, and if you're joining us on Zoom, it's great to have you with us, and you can put your questions and answers to Claire or myself in the Q&A box. If you're listening to us on Facebook, my colleague Pam is in the background monitoring any comments or questions on Facebook, and she will put those through to us. And also on LinkedIn, we're also broadcasting on LinkedIn. We've finally got our LinkedIn video license, which is great, so we can reach out to more of you. And again, if you have any questions, please do put them in the comments box on LinkedIn. If we have questions after we've finished this Lunch and Learn session this lunchtime, we will certainly reach out to you afterwards as well. So please do send us your questions. If it's your first time, like, share and comment. If it's your second time, maybe give us a bit of love, give us a love heart, share and comment, and we'd also love to know where you're listening to us from as well. But Claire, let's just to introduce you more formally, your contact details are on the screen, Claire, from Acorn Support. Do you want to tell us a bit more about what you do on a day-to-day basis, Claire?
We're the painkillers, the paracetamol, the solution finders for all things HR. So it's not just dealing with the pains, but we really work with our clients to ensure that they're the best that they can be and that they're employing the best of employees. And when there are any issues, any niggles, any pains that occur, we resolve them with coaching and supporting the employees and managers, but going down to a root cause level rather than just the sticking plaster. And policies and procedures, handbooks, all that stuff. That's kind of a given, but our real remit is to work with the best, to develop them to be the best and to solve any issues.
Brilliant. And Claire, it's so important, I think, you talk about the root cause. I've worked with many organizations in the past, and when I first meet the business owners, they have put many sticky plasters on many parts of the business, but that sticky plaster only holds for so long. So yes. It's really important, isn't it, to actually, delve that bit deeper, and to use a well-known phrase, to drill a bit deeper, dig a bit deeper and find out what the root cause is, and then put some sort of longer term, more permanent solutions in place.
Absolutely.
But Claire, as I said, as we were just coming on to this Lunch and Learn today, Matt Hancock is making his announcements. But one of the things that many people may well be listening to us today, they may well be sitting there at home on furlough. So let's sort of cover that off first. I think it's a good place to start in terms of, we're in lockdown number 2 at the moment. It sounds a bit like a film, doesn't it? Lockdown 2.0. I can see the trailer coming for lockdown 3.0. Who knows? But let's think positive. Absolutely, we're in lockdown 2.0, and there are going to be many people out there who, for whatever reason, are on furlough, whether it's full time, this new flexi furlough. Claire, for those people who are in that situation, or perhaps aren't in that situation, just tell us a bit more about where we are with furlough, what the different options are, what furlough is.
Okay, well, furlough is now going to be a term in the Oxford English Dictionary from the next edition.
Brilliant.
Because it was a whole new word that we weren't aware of prior to the 23rd of March this year. Couple of points to make. The original furlough scheme ended at the end of October. And we have until the 30th of November, so Monday next week, you have until that date to get any of your furlough grant applications in. If you don't do it by that date for the original scheme, you will lose out.
Brilliant. So very clear. Monday, you have to have your application in to reclaim any expenses associated with that first lockdown furlough period.
Absolutely.
Right. So hope you all noted that down, ladies and gentlemen. That's really important.
Get that date in because you won't get the opportunity to look back on it.
Right.
So a new scheme, or furlough 2.3 or whatever we're on now, is in place and has been put in place from the 1st of November until the 31st of March. There is a commitment that there will be a review in January. We don't know yet what that's going to look like. But what we currently have is that if you've got somebody who was employed in the business on the 30th of October and had been submitted on an RTI submission on the 30th of October, you can now include them into furlough for this element of the scheme. So originally we're going back to the dates previous, it's now a new date. So that is really important to note, because you can be including people in it. They don't have to have been furloughed before any of those kind of restrictions have been lifted.
So Claire, just for the benefit of our listeners, so repeat that date again. So they have to be on the system by the 30th of October.
Yeah, and have to have had a payroll RTI submission. So that's the real-time information submission has to have been in prior to that date.
Right.
But that includes a vast number of people who may well have been excluded before. So that's really good information.
That's really good news to help out those who really need it right now as well.
Yeah. Back up to the 80% of salary, capped at £2,500. Which is fantastic. And that's the area that I think may be adapted when we come into January. But at the moment, what we're facing now, from the 1st of November, it can be that full amount up to the 80%. Go on, sorry.
That review is what a lot of people are asking me about. And obviously, we don't know what that is. But furlough this time, Claire, it is a more flexible system, program, whatever you want to call it, approach than the first time around. Is that fair that's correct?
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes, it is, because we can still be applying that flexible furlough. So we can still have somebody who's on a reduced working if that's what we need as a business. So we can still be applying that, and that's really important to note. Just before I forget, there is also now a requirement that you apply for your furlough grant on a monthly basis, and they are having the cut-offs now, because what a lot of companies were doing was building up for 2 or 3 months and then applying, but there's very strict deadlines in place.
So you need to make, and as I understand it, Claire, you pay as you normally would your staff from your normal business accounts, and then you claim it back. It's not a case of the government paying direct. It's not a case of the government paying up front. You have, as a business owner, to pay in a normal way your staff their wages, and then you claim it back.
Absolutely, you're quite right there, and that is really important, because there are we knew at the very beginning that HMRC were going to have a task force to investigate this, and they are doing it. And it's one of those areas where employers were using it to support their cash flow. And they were saying, we'd make a payroll, we'd put the RTI in, we'd then claim for the furlough grant. When the money came in, they would then pay the employees, and that is an unlawful application for the grant. So,
right, so really important.
You're not at risk by doing that. Pay your employees, payroll them, RTI, pay them, apply for the grant, and then the grant comes back into the company's finances.
And I have Sarah just asking the question, Claire, how quick is that turnaround in terms of paying the employee and getting the money back in? So Sarah's keen to know that.
It's pretty quick. It's a few days. They're doing some checks on them just to make sure that the RTI is in there. I'm seeing it in a few days. I personally haven't done that with the Acorn team for some time, thankfully. But everything that I'm hearing, the system is in place, it is working well. The investigations will be occurring. They're doing them now, and we have to keep all of the information for 5 years, because when we look at the bill that we're incurring for the job retention scheme, it's billions, and they will be investigating.
Yes, absolutely. We heard the Chancellor yesterday saying, we're only just starting with the economic crisis. There's going to be a huge, years ahead of sort of, recovering from the bill, the financial implications of this.
Absolutely, we will. Absolutely. But just to remember that when the furlough is put in place, It's the company makes the decision as to whether they're going to furlough somebody. It's not an employee decision. It can be used where an employee is required to provide care as a result of furlough, but that is not an automatic right for somebody. We've supported a client recently where an employee sent a text message to say that they will be on furlough for the next 2 weeks because the children's school has closed. And we needed to go back and have that dialogue with the employee, because whilst we, as the business, they understood that children have to be looked after, and they do, that the furlough is a business decision, and the business, it costs the business to be able to do it, because there's still the ongoing costs that we have for employees, but also the business puts at risk their application if it isn't a genuine situation. And furlough is there to retain people's jobs when the work isn't available. However, we can use it on these particular circumstances. So with that one, we actually went back to the employee and went, okay, hear what you're saying, but we actually need to have some dialogue here. What can you do to still be able to deliver on some work? Because for their product line, this is a busy season. You know, can you adapt when you work? We can adapt when you're available. You have to come into work because the machinery is there. But are there ways in which you may be able to work a different shift pattern? Instead of working 3 full days, can you work 5 part days? And it hadn't occurred to them that they could actually do that, and that they needed to speak to their family to see who else could be available to provide the childcare. And it resulted in a great response from the employee, and they're not furloughed because we've adapted the way in which they can be working.
Brilliant. Yeah, so it's about, I absolutely hear what you're saying, Claire. So it's about thinking about, you know, flexible working arrangements before making a decision to furlough staff is really important. Going back to the process of furlough, as I understand it, obviously, as you say, in most situations the staff can't request it, but if it is something, a decision that a business owner has made, I think there's quite a clear process in terms they need to communicate the decision about furlough and give the employee an opportunity to respond to that. Is that correct?
Yes, we've got letters that are available where you enter into agreement with the employee that that's what's going to happen, that as part of the job retention scheme, we will furlough them under these arrangements, that it will be reviewed on a basis that's regular enough for that organisation, and that it can be changed at any point. And the requirements would be that the employee remains available for work at any point that that's needed. But we've got documents available for that, and we've got the ways in which we can communicate that with businesses and employees.
Brilliant. So if you're in that process at the moment and not sure how to communicate with your employees, absolutely contact Claire. She's got templates and advice that she can give, and I know you will give all the support you can, Claire, to any business owner in that scenario. Now, furlough number 1, Claire, was very, very rigid in terms of what people could and couldn't do, and also the time periods. I think it was 3 weeks, a minimum of 3 weeks on furlough at any one time, but you could mix people on and off furlough within the organisation. Now, this flexible furlough is slightly different, isn't it, Claire? It's a slightly different approach in terms of what people can and can't do, whether it's a mix of being employed and on furlough. How's that working?
That's working really well, because the flexibility that was there is what businesses needed. Because what we did find is that before, where it was really quite restrictive, it had to be a permanent, or not permanent, but a full normal working hours capacity that you were furloughed for a minimum of 3 weeks. And for many businesses to be able to look forward for that period of time, as things were changing so dynamically, caused a lot of issues. The way in which we have it now is there is much greater flexibility. There is much greater ability to adapt, talk about having everybody doing some work, but sharing that load. And the furlough grant is then applied to the proportion of time that somebody isn't working as a result of COVID and furlough. So from a business perspective, the opportunity that we have now of sharing that capacity, sharing that furlough load is much greater, and it's proving to be really successful for a lot of companies.
Brilliant. And it's it can be a really effective strategic decision if you're an industry that is going to be quiet over Christmas, and your cash flow is going to be difficult, then flexible furlough may well be a really good option for your organization. Sarah, again, it's good to have you with us today. So it's just asking, in terms of flexible furlough, is there a minimum number of hours that the employee has to be paid for by the company to access flexible furlough?
1/3. So the minimum you can reduce their capacity is by 1/3.
So the minimum you can reduce it is by 1/3.
The minimum you can reduce it to, sorry. So the lowest you can go is 1/3 of their normal working, and anything else in between that.
You can't take it lower than 1/3.
Correct.
Right. Okay, that's useful. I hope that's useful to know, Sarah. And in terms of it, you say it can be anything in between those two.
Yes, it can. So it does give you that ability to go with the ebb and flow of the business in the way that is needed, to adapt to the changes, to adapt to the way in which the business needs. And if somebody is required to provide care as a direct result of COVID, you can utilise that as well.
Right, that's really helpful.
It's that 1/3 that's the minimum that we need to be considering. But if anybody's looking at that, the team can help work out what to do and how to approach it.
That's really helpful. Now, Claire, just is there anything else you want to cover on for anything I've not covered, or any questions, or not questions, but anything else we've not covered?
Probationary periods.
Yes.
So probationary periods and notice. So if you've got somebody who's in a probationary period during their employment and you furlough them, in that furlough letter, just advise them that their probationary period will be stopped during furlough and restarted and continue at the end. So we can take out that chunk of time where they're not working.
Yes, it'd be very unfair to measure somebody on performance when they're on furlough in terms of probation, wouldn't it?
Equally, it's not equitable for the business to only have that period of time to be able to assess somebody's skills, abilities, and suitability for the company and the role when they're not there. So we have got the pause and restart. One of the things that has changed is the current first furlough scheme is we could utilise that to cover somebody's notice period if they were furloughed whilst on notice. We can't do that now. So if somebody is under notice of termination for whatever reason, then you would be having to manage that without the furlough scheme. So you'll be paying that notice period at 100% direct from the company.
So either negotiate the notice period if that's happy with the employee, or pay it as you normally would under your normal contractual terms.
Absolutely, yes.
Just another question from Jamal. It's good to have you with us, Jamal. Again, just on furlough. Claire, we haven't covered this point, but we're coming up to Christmas and a season of hopefully some merriment. If it might be a different Christmas this year, and people will be taking holiday. And Jamal's just asking in terms of holiday, does he still need to take holiday whilst on furlough, or not?
Yeah, it's one of the things that we can be doing. We can be utilising furlough within that arrangement. We were anticipating that it would be picked up, but it hasn't, from the guidance and notes that we've been seeing coming through. So while people are on that shutdown period, they can be using their holiday. We would actually be guiding you into doing that. One of the things that has been made available is the ability to carry forward annual leave by up to 2 weeks over the next 2 years, because people weren't able to take the leave. That is available. However, I would caution that if that happens and somebody has a pay rise, for example, and then takes that leave, then that time would be paid at their new rate. So just be cautious that that may have additional costs to the business. But where you can, give people the break. Where you can, manage it within the business to give you the best kickstart for 2021.
Brilliant. Absolutely. Good point there, Claire. And I hadn't thought, in terms of annual leave, if somebody is taking it on a higher rate in the new year, next financial year, yes, of course, it's going to cost you as a business, isn't it? An increased cost to the business.
The thing as a business you can do is you can advise an employee when they need to take the leave if you need to. So even if you don't do a normal shutdown, what you can be saying is that we are going to shut down and that an employee would utilise their annual leave for that time. You do have to put it in writing. You do have to provide a minimum of double the notice of which the time they want to take. So if they take 1 day's leave, you give them 2 days notice. If it's 1 week's leave, it's 2 weeks notice. But just be mindful.
So the message there, I guess, is if you're closing for 2 weeks over Christmas in your organisation, you're really getting very close to the time in which you need to let your staff know. It needs to be now, almost in the next day or so.
If it's over Christmas, you may be too late if you want the 2 weeks.
So we need to, as business owners, if you are planning any sort of close down over Christmas, get that notice to your employees as soon as, well, today, tomorrow is the message. There's lots of dates and things people need to be doing right now and bearing in mind, isn't there, Claire?
There's a couple of workarounds. There are a couple of workarounds with it, but that would need to be discussed on a business case by case basis. But yeah, there's options there.
Brilliant. Now, Claire, as I said at the very beginning, as we came on to this Lunch and Learn webinar, Mr. Hancock, and I'm sure Mr. Mr. Johnson, there we are, at the podium, making their announcements. And, for many organisations, many employees, there's going to be this continued, particularly in Birmingham. I think Birmingham is going to continue, it's going to be in tier 3 with additional restrictions and quite difficult restrictions for many industries, many organisations, and for many clients and colleagues and contacts I have in my circles. There's going to be continued working from home, continued unusual working arrangements, and many questions such as, can we have business meetings? Can we do this? Can we do that? In terms of, we're still yet to see the final detail, aren't we, Claire, about what tier 3 really does mean in practice, but one would assume it is going to be fairly similar to where we are at the moment in terms of the current restrictions. And what are your thoughts about best working practice, what we can and can't do whilst we're working under such restrictions, Claire?
Well, there's 2 things really to separate here. Is that a lot of the issues that we have and restrictions are the way in which we socialise, but we also need to be considering the way in which we conduct business, and the 2 may blur, but we need to identify what is the requirement from a business perspective. Indeed. So, for example, with our business, if we need to be seeing a client or an employee, then providing we follow appropriate safe practices, we've got a risk assessment, we do the PPE with the sanitising, then those business meetings, if they have to, can still go ahead. Where we are able to, we would still continue to use technology to have remote access, remote working. But if the business requires it, it can still go ahead. The other side of it is that where we have the ability to allow people to work from home, and that's the ability from a technical perspective as well as the work itself, then we should continue to do that. But there is a balance there in that the impact that can be had by somebody being remote all the time can have a detrimental effect on their welfare and also potentially their ability to work. When we first went into this working from home, productivity kind of went up for a lot of people because it was new, it's exciting, I hadn't got the phone distractions and I could focus on things.
Yes, so indeed.
It wears you out. I did 6.5 hours on Zoom on Tuesday and I was good for nothing. There were chunks in between, but it was too much because it changes the way in which we are engaging with people. I'm a people person. I thrive on that connection with people, and I can't get that same connection when I'm looking at a screen. So I would be, and I'm trying to do it now, and I know you will be, Stephen, is to look at the camera, but also I'm wanting to look at you, and you're down here, so I can see your reactions. And
my second screen is over here.
Yeah, we're constantly having to change and adapt in that way. So the working from home is an issue, and is something that we can continue to be doing, as is right for the business and as is right for individuals. The risk assessments still have to be carried out, because whilst somebody may be working in their own home, if they're working for you, you still have that responsibility for them. So there still has to be a policy, there still has to be a risk assessment, and it still has to be reviewed on a regular basis. We did have somebody who was working off their sofa with some cushions and pillows and books and things, and we had to guide that client to stop that practice immediately. Because the risks to that person's health, sitting in a sofa like this and working like this, was not going to be good for them. So in fact, the right thing for that individual is they came back into the office.
It's also fair to say, Claire, that when we started furlough the first time around, started working from home the first time around, so got furlough on my mind, circumstances were different. As you said, it was new for everybody. We were all, excited, enthusiastic in many ways to be working in a different way. Not everyone was about it. I absolutely grant you that. But the clocks have gone back. People's circumstances have changed. People are now having to take children to and from school. There's pros and cons to that. But I think what's going through my mind is, if you haven't, as listeners out there today, and Claire giving your view, but now is almost the time to go back and make sure you've undertaken that risk assessment again. Don't rely on one from March last year or this year even. Go back and review it to make sure you update it on a regular basis.
Yeah, and part of that review and the way in which we've constructed our documents is to ensure that the employee has the understanding of what the issues are, and that there is an obligation on them to report to you if there's a change. It's quite easy that a new cable can be put in, or a trail of wires, or, when we thought we might be working from home for a few weeks, sitting at the dining table with a static chair might have been okay, but for 6 months it's not, because you need to have that ability to move, to be able to roll the chair back, to be able to get out of it. And when you're doing that with a solid chair, it creates different pressures on the body. Also, the way in which we had set up our screens and our keyboard, we have to be aware of the way in which our bodies need to work in conjunction with our equipment. So your screen needs to be at a certain height so you can be looking straight across at it, not down. Make sure your keyboards are at the right height so you're not bending your wrists, all those sorts of things. And certainly when you're in the office, you should assess your chair on a regular basis to ensure that it hasn't sunk, it hasn't changed. So somebody's not come in and just moved the lever and things like that. So we should be doing that on a regular basis anyway, but even more so.
You remind me, Claire, when we first started working from home, and for partly because I had the children here at home with me, I was working at the dining room tables. But after a while, I noticed the back of my neck started really to ache. And it was just a simple thing of the right chair and the right height of the desk. So I'm now back in my office, the children are at school. It's obviously much easier. But simple things, you think sitting at a dining table will be fine, but long term, especially with, as we said earlier, we're focusing on this camera all the time. Our necks and our bodies are in a different position to perhaps how we have been working in the past. But going back to you said,
we had an absolute classic. There was a colleague who was working from the dining table, and after a while, same thing as you were experiencing, and he'd been there for ages, and he was like, I really must sort out a chair from the office. And he looked across, and in his dining room, there was a chair that was due to go back to the office that was sitting there with papers piled up on it. And he was like, that's been there for those weeks, and just wheeled it round and sat in it and was like, Bliss. You're using it as a
I just imagine the moment. Yes.
Yeah.
And I, you what I was going to say is you said about the importance of an employee, sharing with the employer any change in circumstances. I think the other area of confusion, certainly with clients that I work with and coach, is that initial understanding of what they are responsible for. The liability on them as the employer to make sure the right setup, the right equipment. And yes, there may be an expense, but longer term, it may be a lower expense to get UPS or somebody else to get a chair out to your employee. Instead of having these empty chairs in the office, get one sent to the employee at home. Yes. Get the right equipment, invest in a laptop stand, yes. Simple things that don't need to cost too much, that absolutely, and other things such as having, overloaded sockets in the house, get the right connections, get the extension leads, whatever it is you need. But little things like that really need to be covered in a risk assessment and reviewed and adapted.
Yeah, absolutely. And those things shouldn't be forgotten, because you know what it's like when the kids are at home. Suddenly you find that there's all these other cables that have been plugged in to charge their equipment. It's like, where did that lot come from? So yes, it's important to review it and then kick the kids out of the office, definitely.
Well, I have to say, Claire, there's two sides to that, because as much as I loved having my kids at school, I'm pleased at home, at school now, but I am missing my regular coffees that used to suddenly appear from this background behind me. A little hand would appear with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. So but then the downside of that is I wasn't getting up and moving around, so whichever way you look at it. Yes. So, Claire, the other thing I just wanted to cover today on our Lunch and Learn is I've mentioned that word once already, and I know that all of us are going to be leaving our hand sanitizer out for Father Christmas this year, as well as the carrot and the cookie, under the instructions of our Prime Minister. I don't know, have you seen that letter on the website, Claire? He's writing to a little boy asking, is Santa going to come with COVID? And Boris turns around and says, make sure you leave your hand sanitizer. Santa's still going to do his job, because he's done a risk assessment, of course. But as I mentioned Christmas, because I think it is a time of year traditionally where all of us as employees, as employers, can let our hair down, dare I say, if you've got any. But we can let our hair down, we can socialize, we can get to know each other that little bit better, learn a bit more about what's going on in the family, talk about the lighter side of life, and do that face to face, as we've enjoyed doing it for many, many years. This year is going to be very different, isn't it, Claire? And I am conscious, being a mental health advocate myself, of the impact on that, and just in actually the impact of today's changes in the tiering systems, etc., particularly for businesses in Birmingham and in Kent, where I live, being in tier 3. So what am I going to with this? I'm thinking about Christmas dues. I'm thinking about the restrictions that for many of us are going to continue in Birmingham, and people's mental health. And I never apologize, Claire, to you or anybody else for showing this slide. You've seen it with me many times. People were hoping for change. They were hoping for the end of restrictions, particularly in Birmingham and in the hospitality industry. And I've seen many messages in the last half an hour with some quite interesting language, as people realize that those restrictions for many of us in Birmingham are going to be continuing. So what can we do as employers to support ourselves, our colleagues, our employees, and anybody else around us in terms of going through this next period, in terms of Christmas dues, in terms of mental health, etc.? There's a huge question there, and there's lots in there. Let's unpack that a little bit. Where do we start, Claire?
We start with asking, we start with talking. It all comes back to the dialogue that you have with yourself. Not that you talk to yourself, but with what you want to be doing as a business and how your employees are, and to really ask. So, Stephen, how are you? Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. So we're going to crack on with this. No, I don't want the doctor's waiting room answer. How are you? How is this affecting you? How are you going to be planning Christmas? What is that going to mean for you? Can we help? Can we think about things differently? There is a concern that I have on how as a nation we're going to come out of this from a mental health perspective. The things that we knew that we enjoyed doing have had to change. The connections that we have with people have had to change. I'm a social person. I love the interaction with people, as we were talking before, and I feel bereft because I can't see and connect with people in the way that I know is so important. But it doesn't mean to say we can't. We just need to turn things on their head and to adapt them. The work side of things, Christmas was a really good time where we could celebrate the successes that you've had in the business, and all too often, and I know any of your clients with Action Coach, the recognition and celebration is really key. But quite often that can be forgotten, because once we've done something, we then roll on to the next thing and then the next thing. And we would take opportunities like the Christmas celebration to recognise the successes.
Yes.
We can still do that, but we do it in a different way. We could still have the fun of the Secret Santas, although data protection we may have to think about. But you can still do that by exchanging them one way or the other, if that's some fun that you had.
Yes, just on that, Claire, interrupting you, but a couple of things. Firstly, there is, we perhaps shouldn't promote one individual company, but there are ways in which you can do a Secret Santa by submitting your details, because each of us are then submitting our details independently to an online Secret Santa generator. Yes. And then you can put your wish list on and it will send the details out to the right people. And I think it's a lovely way to help people with their mental health and with feeling connected and part of something. So a lot of people cringe and say, oh, not the Secret Santa. And I know it can be cringeworthy in terms of what you get, but absolutely this year more than ever, to feel part of something and physically get something in the post from your workplace, I think is really, really important.
Yeah. I've done them before with a networking group that we're on, and we had a limit, I think it was of £10, and it had to be spent in a charity shop. So actually it was part of us giving back as well. Oh, we had a great time, an absolute hoot doing it, because it's the fun that's involved around it, making sure that we are respectful to the people that we're buying for, and one person's humour may not be shared elsewhere. So ensure that you're still appropriate, but we can do those things. We can still have the fun. We can still have quizzes online. There are some amazing people that we know who can have quizzes that are online. You can still actually do a Christmas dinner with the family via technology. So yes, you can say, right, we're going to have this as a starter and everybody gets it. And this is the time that we do the starters. Then we'll break off and then we'll have, the Christmas dinner. So you're all there ready to pull the crackers between people. There's ways in which we can be adapting the way in which we work and the way in which we work as families as well as business. But we have a lot to celebrate, an awful lot. There are some absent friends that we can still toast to and celebrate their involvement in the lives that we've got and that we've had. And maybe this is the time that we park what we have always done, because we've always done it. Maybe this is the time that we go, okay, what do we fancy doing that weekend instead? How are we going to make it different? How are we going to bring in the fun that we have? Because we can do it and we will do it.
Absolutely. And again, a couple of thoughts going through my head, just going back to the Secret Santa, well, not the Secret Santa, but I know of a couple of organizations that are having Christmas dues online, but actually the owners of those organizations are sending out a cheese and wine pack to every employee.
Yes.
So, you can do something slightly different. You think about how much we have traditionally put into, the tabs at the bar, the hiring of venues, all sorts, take that, divvy that up, use that and think, how could I connect with each of my employees? What could I send out to involve them in something online, something virtually? The other point you've made, Claire, which I think is
just be mindful that it's not always alcohol.
Absolutely. Yes. Make sure there's a choice.
We find something that resonates with everybody.
Yes, and an organisation I'm part of with Action Coach in on a national level are you log in and you choose what package you would like, and then it gets sent to you in the post. There are different ways of doing it. Absolutely agree. We need to make sure we give the employees a choice. Yes. The other thing I think as business owners and leaders, whether you're a business owner or not, that you as a leader in your organisation, this year more than ever, in my personal view, Claire, and you've touched on it, we absolutely need to be reflecting. We need to park the challenges and we need to reflect on the success. and the positives that 2020 have had. It is very easy to go what I would call below the line and look at the blame, the excuse, and the denial. But we need to be taking accountability, ownership, and responsibility, staying above the line. And let's look at the things we have done that have gone well. That might be related to the business. It might be, Sandra, and Sandra and Jackie have had a baby this year. It could be anything that's gone on associated with the people who work for your business and the business itself. But let's try and get some positive vibes. And I think it's really important now more than ever to celebrate the things that have gone well in the year. Not sort of cancel Christmas and cancel the Christmas dues, but that use it as a time to reflect on what has gone well and why has that gone well, and most importantly, what can we learn from that going into 2021. And let's use this opportunity as a time to reflect and make sure we go forwards with the right attitude and the right mindset. And I think Christmas gatherings can be a great opportunity for that, to reflect, but also to draw a line, as you say, and to do things a bit differently. Draw a line towards the end of 2021 for everyone's mental health. Get some closure on the year from the employees' perspectives and the organisation perspective, and then kickstart 2021.
Totally agree. The other thing is to talk to your teams about how they want to celebrate it. Doesn't always have to be the business owner that comes up with the ideas.
Absolutely. It's a great way to great way to include people, isn't it?
And the other thing to do is go, do you know what? We can't do it at the moment, but let's look to April, for example, or March. Let's still have the money in the budget. Let's still have the thoughts of what we can be doing, and we'll just move it, because the entertainment industry will be back. Again, we're social people, and let's make sure that they're able to come back with vengeance and be there, and us all celebrate the fantastic venues that we have got available, and just move it to another time in the year.
Absolutely. I love that idea. Not only will that help the entertainment industry in Birmingham and further afield, but it also, sends a clear message to your teams, to the organisation, that we're here to support you. And we absolutely are committed to giving you the full experience of working in this organisation. We're not just going to cancel it and make a saving. I also, having said all that, appreciate that many organisations are struggling financially, yes, and whatever they do may have to be tapered down and tailored down from previous years.
Yeah, absolutely. But you can still say thank you.
Absolutely.
Can still say well done. You can still say thank you. You can still be, where are we going next year? Because we are where we are. Let's see what we're going to plan to do next.
I know you fairly well, Claire, but I think it's fair to say, certainly talking my own experience, that we all thrive on praise and testimonials and feedback from clients, from colleagues, from our managers, from those we work with. It's really important to make sure we do say thank you. I can see, I know staff I've managed and people I work alongside, it's almost like a spring in their step when they've had a great testimonial, or they've had some praise and some positive feedback, and it's really important we continue to do that. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, people like that feedback in different ways. So what's really important, and where we work with our clients, is to understand what each employee needs in terms of that feedback. There are some people who want the trumpet fanfare and go, do-do, you've done it, because that's what they thrive on. There are other people who thrive on a handwritten note that recognises what they've done and the thank you to go with it, and maybe a cake or a box of chocolates or something. So work out what's appropriate for your team, but make sure it's there. Doesn't cost anything to say thank you.
Absolutely, and it can make all the difference. And I think it's really important. We talked a bit about Christmas and sort of making sure we bring our teams together and support, but mental health goes on 365 days a year, and we need to look out for our staff 365 days a year.
Yeah.
And so if you're not familiar with the arena of mental health, there is some great support out there. There's Mental Health Association, there's other organizations, both for getting information as a business owner in terms of how you can support your staff, but also signposting your team too. You said earlier on, Claire, about the doctor waiting room response. How are you? Oh, I'm okay, thank you. And it's we've got another colleague that we both know, Becky Coombe, who's done Lunch and Learns with us on mental health specifically, and it's, are you okay? And then the second question is, come on, Claire, are you really okay? And I think just taking that time to ask that second question and really understand what's going on beneath the surface is so important.
Yeah. One of the things that that you can ask is in, so we often talk about a pattern change, a pattern disrupt. Hi, how are you? Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How's the family? Yeah, all good, great, thanks. Lovely to see you. Bye. So change that and say, what's happening with the family? Are the children at school? What's the latest success in work? My stepdad's favorite, what's new, exciting and interesting? And that changes that discussion quite significantly. Or I notice you're not looking as bright as you normally would. What's going on? Instead of are you okay? Because the instant answer is yes. Just change it around slightly to bring out, to demonstrate that you are genuinely interested, and to bring out a different response. Change that pattern.
Yes, I mean, a phrase I have used before is, you're not your normal bubbly self today, Claire.
Yeah.
How are you?
Don't go in to say, clearly you haven't slept well because those bags under your eyes can have the shopping in for a whole street, because that may not work. But you're not looking as sprightly as you normally do is a good one.
And a top tip I was told many years ago was, think about as you're going to approach a sales situation with a potential prospect, you wouldn't ask closed questions. So do the same with your colleagues in the organization. Don't say, how are you? I'm okay. Or are you okay? Yes or no. But I think of when I talk to my children and have they come home from school, and I say, I could have said, was school okay today? I'll get a yes or no. But instead, what did you learn at school today? Or what was the most exciting thing you did in the playground? And you'll get a much more informed answer. And it's the same with our colleagues in the workplace, and just looking out, as you said, Claire, for those changes in behaviors. Perhaps somebody's coming a bit late on a regular basis, or somebody's seems very distracted, or they're on the mobile phone quietly in the corner a lot. If there's things like that going on around you in the office, just take a few minutes, go and have a chat with them. Maybe to go and get a coffee at the coffee machine, or find a way of just approaching them and just check out, see how they are right now, because we're all dealing with this journey of transition in a very personal and a very independent, individual way, and it impacts on all of us and all of our lives in a very in a personal way as well.
And remember, mental health first aiders, if you don't have them within your organisation, look to organisations that can support that. Our team are all qualified to provide that support, and just have somewhere where they can reach out and have a chat, because that can be invaluable to then signpost people on to where they can get additional support.
Yes, I was just about to pick up on that, Claire. So I remember you saying last time you were with us that all your staff are trained mental health first aiders. Brilliant. As am I. So there's two people on the phone here on this Lunch and Learn webinar. If you have any concerns, please contact Claire or myself. We're not mental health professionals, but we have the knowledge to be able to signpost and support. I think, is that fair to say, Claire, on your behalf as well?
Yeah. I mean, I've got some qualifications sort of hidden in the background there, but it's really about knowing how to have the conversation to enable somebody to open up that they need somebody to provide them with that time and that support and guidance, and to sign people on to appropriate services that can help where they need to. But often half an hour of listening and understanding can be as invaluable as anything else.
Absolutely. And if somebody comes into the office and you talking and say, I've got a lot on my mind at the moment, do take time to just ask those additional questions. I think it's where we started with mental health, wasn't it, Claire? And that journey of transition. I'm conscious we have covered an awful lot, and I didn't know how long would be this lunchtime, Claire. We're normally about an hour, but I thought we've had you on a few times. Maybe we've covered all the topics, but it just goes to show just how much there is to cover. In working from home, in furlough, in mental health and well-being. And the world is ever changing, isn't it? And I'm sure we're not going to be here in 4 weeks because we're both going to be relaxing at home with our families, I hope. But I'm sure if we were to be here in 4 weeks, there'll be more new things and updates to talk about as well. I think that's a really important message from me, and I'm sure you would share it, that, you know, don't think you've done your research once and you've done it. You know, keep going back, checking on, you know, checking on the latest furlough updates, checking on the latest government guidelines, checking on the, you know, on the tiers and what you can and can't do, because the guidance is changing all the time. And most importantly, don't check on your staff once and think you've done that as well. You know, keep going back, keep that communication, all those channels of communication open as much as you can, especially when they're working remotely from home.
Absolutely, absolutely. Everything changes, as do we. So keep check on it.
Brilliant. I think that feels like a quite a sensible place to sort of bring things to a natural conclusion, Claire. But before we go our separate ways, first of all, I want to thank you personally from me for all the input you've given to our Lunch and Learns this year. I think this is the last time we're together before Christmas. So thank you for everything you've done and the advice and guidance you've given, not just to us here at Action Coach, but all of those who are listening and part of our Lunch and Learn family. So thank you for all you've given. If people want to pick up, I'm sure there will be many people who want to pick up and connect with you further and outside of this, Claire. I'll put your details on the screen again, but what does that look like, and when is the best time, and how can people get hold of you?
Well, via technology, any time's a good time. Drop me an email, call into the office, 0156288, where is it there? 881019. I'm reading it backwards. I feel like I'm on a celebrity chat show or something here.
Yeah, I have to put the wrong hand up. That's where I go wrong, Claire.
But yes, seriously, if anybody does want to touch on anything, please don't hesitate to give us a call. We're here to help. And it's been great to be on, and thank you for asking me several times.
Yes,
it's either that, or you know that you've got somebody who will talk for an hour.
No, Claire, if I'm being really honest, I know we've got somebody who will talk on a subject that people need to know about and want to listen to. And that's really important in an ever-changing world as business owners, where HR, a bit like finance, is an area that can be quite challenging at times. I think it's so important to make sure people have the right advice and the clear advice as they go along through this challenging year, which is why I've been so pleased that you've been, you know, kind enough and gracious enough to come and join us on a regular basis, and I really do appreciate that. And I'm sure that the conversations we've had have not just helped one, but helped many business owners throughout 2020 to make sure they've got the right things in place for themselves and for their colleagues. So from all of us at Action Coach, thank you, Claire, for joining us. And once we've finished, I should be on the phone to see what dates we've got available in January, because I'm sure there'll be the world will have changed again by the time we get to New Year. But let's round off 2020 by saying thank you for all you've done this year. I really do appreciate it. Claire's contact details are on the screen, as are mine. If you have any queries, anything we've covered today, please do contact either myself or Claire, and we would love to have that further conversation. But for now, Claire, thank you so much for your time this lunchtime. Thank you to all our listeners. As I said at the beginning, if you have questions, if you're listening to this on LinkedIn, on Facebook or YouTube at a later stage, please do still put your questions on there. Please do still reach out to us. We are here and really keen to work with you and see how we can help going forwards. But for now, most importantly of all, look after yourselves, look after your teams, and we look forward to catching up with you next week for another Lunch and Learn here with Action Coach in Birmingham. But for now, take care and have a great afternoon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.